Hey, this is Jim at Broadfield. Thanks for joining us for another Broadfield Liquid Lunch and Learn every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a great show planned for you today, introducing the brand new addition, the M4350 family of switches to NETGEAR AV Pro AV Switches, available now at Broadfield, as well as some other news that they announced at Infocom. Before we get into this week's show, as we give all of our dealers a chance to join in, I have opened up a brand new IPA to join us. This is the Endless Summer Hazy IPA from a local Long Island brewery, Oyster Bay Brewing Company. Right here on Long Island, they're only about 10 minutes away from the office here. So if you stop by Broadfield HQ in New York, let me know. We'll make sure we make a field trip out to the Oyster Bay Brewing Company. So cheers. As I mentioned, we are going to talk about the brand new M4350 NETGEAR AV switches, as well as a bunch of other news from NETGEAR. And I'm really excited because I am not going to be doing this introduction on my own. Let's bring up John Henkel from NETGEAR AV, who has agreed to join us as our esteemed guest for today's presentation. Hey, John.
I just came for the beer, Jim, but I'm here to help as well if you need.
Hey, the promise is out there for you too. If you're going to come visit us in New York, let's make sure we make a field trip, all right?
Oh, I'm there. Sounds great.
Excellent. That's great. John, for our dealers who may not be familiar with you, would you give a brief introduction of what you do with NETGEAR AV?
Sure. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for our business division. Everybody knows NETGEAR. We have the home division. We have a whole separate business division. I head up product marketing, which is our website, the collaterals that we send out to you guys, white papers, case studies, anything related to marketing, email marketing as well.
Yep.
That's what me and my team handle.
Excellent. So all of those resources are available, of course, to our Broadfield dealers. So if there is something that you need to help promote the NETGEAR AV switches, reach out to me, Jim at Broadfield.com. I'll work with John. I'll work with Cody. I'll work with the rest of the NETGEAR AV team. We'll make sure that we get you access to all of these great resources. And John, I have to say, great job putting a ton of resources out there for our dealers. You really are making it easy. I appreciate that.
Great to hear that. Thank you. I don't feel like we do enough sometimes, so it's good to hear. Thank you.
It never feels like enough until you look at your watch and you realize you've been in the office all day, right?
Yeah, all of a sudden, time for a beer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, I wanted to invite you on to not only introduce the M4350 series of switches, but you guys introduced a bunch of other stuff at Infocom this year as well, right?
We did. You know, the focus was certainly on those switches, as it has been for a while for the switch part of it. But really, we're coming out with a lot of other good things we'll talk about today, too. So from software, the Engage controller, we have a new router to talk about. But yeah, the focus certainly was on the 4350 series of switches.
Excellent. And the 4350 is really exciting because I love where they fit into the NETGEAR AV product line. The M4250 has been one of the most successful product families, product launches, however you want to call it, for Broadfield and for our dealers. It really has been a true answer to a lot of the tech support issues we were having with NDI installations. And now, to talk about how the 4350 fits into that product line with, of course, the M4250 affordable switches, the 4300, and now the 4350 is going to be something that we really want to focus on to make sure our dealers get the right switch for the right opportunity. So, John,
you show it right. You show it right there, right on that slide, and we have more coming up too. But that's it. Distinct product categories for their uses, and we'll talk about what those are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I wanted to pull up this slide, because this really does walk through some of that. So, John, I want to ask you to explain some of the differences that our dealers would walk through on their installs.
Yeah, so really the 4250 is more of our 1 gig switch, right? Those are the ones for a lot of your audio over IP, and also some smaller 1G over video over IP too, AV stuff.
Sure.
And those had the ports in the back, so they're really more intended for an AV environment, AV rack. You can reverse mount them if you want. And little things like we give you the rack ears that are recessed, so the front doesn't stick out the rack with all the cables if you do it reverse route, little things. So those were our first AV switch, if you will. The 4300s have been out since, I think, 2016, and they had been the workhorses at AV over IP. That's what got us into this market. So they do great with any kind of multicast audio video. All of these switches have that new AV user interface. And that started on the 4250s with the profiles you're talking about for like NDI configuration. And that's what really started us really gaining traction, I think, was that AV interface. So the 4250s have that. 4300s have that interface now as well. They go up to a little higher, 40 gig uplinks. And then the 4350s came out just in Infocom with a total of 12 models. 7 are available now, but those will get us up to 100 gig uplinks and just faster throughput overall, larger switching fabric, so you can do more on a switch, on one switch than you could before. They also have that AV user interface. I'm going to call the AV operating system now, the AV OS.
Okay.
And then the 4500s on that slide as well were the top of the line. They still are 100 gig switches, but they are command line only. And that's a little bit different for top of the rack installations.
That's great. And I know the M4250 has been really popular in a small studio install, an NDI production studio. It's what we're using in our studio for today's show with our TriCaster system. The 4350 family is going to not only satisfy the AV production techs in your Nest operation, but they're also going to satisfy the IT experts as well, right, John?
Exactly. So, NETGEAR's got over 25 years in the business of making networking products. So we do know IT as well as AV. Yep. And now we're, I think, the only switch manufacturer really doing an AV switch. So with that AV interface and working with all the manufacturers. But you're right, the power of these 4350 switches is pretty phenomenal. So even for IT applications, for top of the rack or just an IT closet somewhere, you don't have to mix and match somebody else's switches with ours. You can use NETGEAR for everything. And then you get the goodness of like the Engage controller to control those top of the rack switches, plus your little switch, the desktop 4250 you might have in a conference room or in a house somewhere. All those are managed through the Engage controller. So it's a nice ecosystem we have, I think.
Absolutely. And you have some nice resources that really illustrate some of the differences between the product line. And it's not just a good, better, best scenario. It really is matching the right switch for the right application, for the right job. And what I like about what you just said is you may be choosing different switches in one corporate environment for different rooms and different applications throughout. So when we're talking to our dealers in the corporate AV space, education, house of worship, it really is putting all of these tools together to meet that right application. And a nice little flow chart like this really helps illustrate some of those advantages, right?
Yeah, it's confusing for a lot of people because there's so many models. I mean, we have what, 10, 20, 30 or 40 different models of switches in just the AV category, I'd say. Yeah. So what's right for what application? Well, first of all, you can reach out to our Pro AV Design Services team for free, and we'll help you figure out what switch is right and help you design your system. But a lot of you, of course, want to know ahead of time to kind of get your budget figured out and figure out what a switch will cost and which of the 3 series is right. So that's why we put together these charts for some of the differences between the 3 switch series.
Yep.
Easy for me to say. And also then what's similar in them. So differences first, like I was mentioning, 1 gig, 1G, or 10 up to 10G for 4250s. The 4250s have 10 gig uplinks, so they can do some 10 gig for aggregation, but great for AVB, Milan. They do have PoE Plus, even PoE Plus Plus, and there's a couple different PoE Plus Plus versions. So this will do up to 90 watts per port, which is pretty sweet. Yep. The 4250s all have an internal power supply. So there's no power redundancy, no external power supply even needed, except for the desktop models. Of course, they have an external power supply. Right. But that's the difference in the 4250s, really. And those are the ones that really have that AV look and feel with the ports in the back and the nice flush front. It's a better aesthetic if you're looking for an AV rack kind of fit. That's the 4250s.
Absolutely. There's a difference between installing a switch into an AV rack versus the IT closet that gets buried away with other installs. And that alone has been, I think, some of the popularity and the adoption of the M4250. And now as you're starting to spec out education, corporate installs and stuff like that, they have the places for the IT gear where the 4350 is going to be a much more powerful workhorse with some of that redundant power capability, the ability to support even greater PoE workflows, and the ability for redundant power supplies as well.
Yep, those are all the perfect points. The 4300s are still out there. Of course, you can still get those too, and those are workhorses, have been working forever in multicast, have all that same AVOS and a profile-based approach to configuration. We have that great 96X, the 2RU version of the 4300 that has modules for different input types, which is really cool. That's still out there available. But if you really want the more next-gen switches, it's the 4350s. and that gives you a couple more things, just a larger switch fabric. So more can happen on the same switch, faster altogether, with higher speed between ports, up to 100 gig uplinks on those switches, 40 gig as well, 2.5 gig, I think. So a wide range of options there. We have half rack versions of the 4350 like we do in the 4300 switch series. So you can just buy a smaller half rack and put something else next to it, or buy two of those. They have a great interlocking ability now that they've made, that the industrial design team did a great job on that. So they can lock together really well for using two of those half racks together in a single rack.
And obviously the moral of the story there is not only are you getting flexible applications and where these switches can be used, but you're getting flexible install options. You're getting all of this capability, allowing our dealers to really find that perfect fit for whatever the install, whatever the project happens to be the next time around. We know every project, every quote, as much as you try to make it cookie cutter, something changes a little bit. You're limited to space in a rack. You're limited to space in an install. These things come up and happen all of the time, right, John?
And something I forget about on the 4250s, I don't know if people take advantage of them. There's different mounting holes on the 4250s because they're easy to mount here and there. You got a quarter thread hole, I think, on the bottom of those, or there's one in the front as well, quarter 20. So there's a VESA mount as well on the bottom. So you can put those anywhere you want, which is really helpful. And then we have the desktop versions, which are relatively small. Although I'll admit the power supply is about the same size as the actual unit, but those can be hidden somewhere in a conference room or behind a monitor. So yeah, a lot of different mounting options for sure.
We sell lots of the PTZ cameras, so our customers are definitely used to those large power supplies and the PoE injectors and everything else that go along with it. In addition to all the hardware differences and the hardware capability, what I like about the NETGEAR line of switches, the NETGEAR AV switches, is that AVOS that you talked about. And now on this slide, we're talking about all of those workflow tools, the AVOS, the Engage controller, all of that is available with the entire family of NETGEAR AV, right?
Yeah, at first it was just on the actual 4250 switches themselves. You had to log into each one, and that's helpful. But we quickly pulled that software out basically to a standalone product. That's what we call it, an AVOS now. Sure. It's an application, just a lightweight application, doesn't require like Windows registry and stuff like that. You could run it off a USB stick if you want. So he could have it with you on a job, plug into any PC or Mac and run that application. But that really lets you log into multiple switches at once, onboard them, update firmware, set profiles across all these different switches. So we do a lot of NDI stuff. So you can say on this switch, I want ports 1 and 2 to be NDI. I want this switch to have ports 5 and 6 be NDI configured. Doesn't have to be the same ports on both switches, things like that. You can do that across the board on multiple switches with the Engage controller. Really, really a time saver. And what's interesting, Jim, is I get people at trade shows who are IT people walking up and they're kind of like poo-pooing the whole, I want a command line, give me an old command line. I want to send all this. Great. And you can do that. They've done that. And now those guys are actually using the AV interface because they know it's trusted and it's certified. And that way, when their people, the AV people go out in the field or the IT people go out to configure a switch, it's consistently configured across the board. So they trust that AV interface now, which is really good to hear.
Absolutely. Once you can convince, and I know our installers know because they're out in the field, once you're convinced that that GUI is going to create the same protocols that you would have done at the command line level, and it works, that objection goes away. All you need is kind of that proof that it is going to work. And NETGEAR AV really has done that so well. And once again, that's why we point these switches out to being the solution to a lot of the tech problems with these AV over IP installations. And that's why we see the business continue to grow. Because now we're even talking about the product families continuing to grow, allowing you to get even into more and more applications. One of the award-winning switches in the 4350 product line is the one we're looking at here, which is the MSM 4352. Tell us a little bit about this one. Yeah.
As it says right there, and Laurent Massier, the product line manager, put these together. It's the best of the best. If he calls it the best, it's the best. This is the highest end switch in this new family. And you can see the amount of total PoE budget on this. It's PoE plus, so up to 90 watts per port, 3,300 watts. It's just ridiculous. It's got a ton of ports for 100 meg, 1G, 2.5G, goes up to 10G on this switch as well, SFP plus ports, SFP 28 ports, sorry.
Okay.
So major
Well,
uplink possibilities
yep.
and that huge fabric in the back. It's pretty outstanding.
And this switch features not only that internal power supply, but optional power supplies. Now, does the PoE capability expand as you use those optional power supplies?
Exactly, Jim. So you can see from the graphic here at the bottom, there's an internal power supply, like you mentioned. Then
Yep.
there's, depending on the model, 1 or 2 more slots for modular PSUs. That can be used for redundancy, which the 4250s didn't have. So that's a great new thing for the 4350s, redundant
Okay.
power supply, but also for PoE budget. And the chart on the next page we have of the slide
Look at
shows you
that.
how that changes,
That's
right?
great.
So it really, it depends on what you need. You don't have to buy the budget if you don't need it. So you can have the single internal PSU and you're done. You're good to go. But as you get up with them 1 or 2 power supplies, you can see it just grows dramatically. And you do got to be careful a bit about this, about which power supply for which model. I think it's the first 7. So the 4350s are in the 2 waves. Wave 1 is out now. Wave 2 coming later in here. And I think the power supplies are based on that wave timing. So you want to make sure you do have the right power supply for the right switch, but Broadfield will take care of you on that. So no problem there.
Absolutely. And John, you mentioned your AV design team as well. So not only is Broadfield a resource for all of our dealers who are joining us today, but NETGEAR AV is a great resource too. Obviously, we have sales techs and engineers, Glenn Seaman, Logan Seaman on our team. They'll give any quote, any project a once over, make sure that everything's going down that right path. But we've reached out to your team. Our dealers have reached out to your team directly. So there's a lot of really good exchange of information to make sure that we get the right product in place for the installation. So definitely take advantage of all of these resources.
Absolutely. And that's the cool thing that people don't realize, that your team has done hundreds of installs. Our team's done hundreds of installs. We've used all kinds of different equipment. So when you're calling up for the first time on a job saying, I've got trouble with XYZ PTZ camera, chances are our team's been through that and they know, did you check the firmware? It needs to be this level above or something like that.
Sure.
That's going to help you out because they're doing this all the time for a living. So it helps.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, I love the way this deck is put together because we keep on going back and forth from talking about the hardware, now back to the software and that AVOS that you were talking about, John.
Yeah, this is something that, I'll be the first one to admit I'm a marketing guy. I'm not the network engineer, but from what I'm told, this was a real pain before, trying to do AVB and Dante and maybe AES 267 or 67 and QSYS on the same switch. They weren't really behaving too well. So they weren't really getting along. So Laurent had heard this forever, and he worked with the software team to make sure that we could develop a profile or profiles that work with each other and work in between themselves. So now everybody gets along. You can do it all on the same switch. You don't have to have a separate switch for AVB and a separate switch for Dante. And that reminds me too, one thing too, Jim, I forgot to bring up earlier. On the 4350s now, AVB is built in, no license required.
Oh, wow.
Unlike
Okay,
the
great.
4250s.
Sure.
So that's a big thing.
That is a big thing. And what I love about the AVOS and what we're talking about is we're going to see a adoption of other AV over IP protocols. We're starting to see some Dante AV hardware products shipping now. We're starting to see them play in the same environments as NDI and NDI-HX. And having all of these different protocols play together in the same installation is going to become increasingly important as people start making decisions of either pairing to their current environments or setting up different environments with different installs throughout a corporation or throughout a campus. All of these things will definitely come into play for sure.
Yep, it isn't either or anymore. It's a mixed environment almost everywhere, right? So we got to make sure we're adjusting for it.
Absolutely. Now, in addition to the M4350 family of switches, NETGEAR also has some other exciting news at InfoComm. This is the first chance we've had to speak to you, to our dealers since then. Why don't you tell us about some of the other great exciting stuff?
Yeah, so we were talking about Engage, Jim, and we released some new software updates to that. And if anybody's going to CDS show coming up, we'll show even more there. So that's, being software, we can update that regularly. So we always have new updates for that. A lot more tools available to you in that user interface, the AVOS, that were only available in the IT interface before, and just easier, better workflows for you in the Engage controller. and that's always downloadable at netgear.com/engage. It's free, so no big deal there. On the upper right there, you see some custom AV profiles. We did this with Shure a little while ago, and now with Crestron, AMX, and Visionary, we have custom profiles that I have to remember the exact functionality. We go detect their encoders, decoders, and we'll put a little logo on those ports for you that shows you those ports have that Shure microphone or AMX encoder or Visionary or Crestron thing. So you can take a look at the switch in the AVOS and see right away which ports are configured for what type of application. Those are still coming and being rolled out. They're not all ready yet, but they're coming.
Great. And then we also have the new PR460X router, right?
Yeah, this is big news, and it's not any way kind of an anecdote. This has been waited for a long time. We've had other routers before, our Orbi Pro router before, but it was more of a desktop situation. People said, look, give me a freaking rack mount router for the home and commercial, for residential and commercial use. So here we go, PR460X. This is the model. It's only available in the channel, so you won't find this for sale on our website or Amazon. Very important point. I know all of you are aware of that. But it's a powerhouse. Look at this. It's got 10 gig SFP plus ports for your LAN. It's got dual WAN failover. So you see a couple different WAN ports there. So for redundancy, that's a really great thing for your network. It's got high speed ports. So when you're connecting to another switch or an access point directly from here, you get the highest speed possible. It's a really small form factor. It's actually using one of our 4250 mechanical enclosures, really, that we adapted for that. So it's that cool AV looking rack mount feel, if you will. Okay. It looks nice in an AV rack with ports in the back, or you can reverse mount it if you want. But it's a real powerhouse router that's professional router. It isn't the full up, crazy expensive business router that you don't need. It's a really great, straightforward, high performance router for professional use.
Perfect. And it fits in perfectly with these AV switch installs, where it's just now another piece of the puzzle, allowing you to get NETGEAR AV into your next installation. Work with Broadfield, our sales team, our sales engineers. We can help get you set up not only with the NETGEAR AV switches, with the router, but with all the NDI products that we have available on the Broadfield line card as well, kind of giving you everything you need for that next installation. Talking about everything you need for your NETGEAR installation, John, you guys have a lot of great resources available to someone looking at NETGEAR AV and also to our dealers to help sell NETGEAR AV.
Yeah, and we're trying to do more and more. You know, there's also a resources section I forgot to put in here too, but you'll find it on the netgear.com/AV. We separate that into commercial and residential AV. And somewhere on there, and I forget where it is, to be honest, somewhere on the page, you'll see a Pro AV resources. That's got a bunch of things there if you need them as well. But right here, you'll see that where to get to the product information. We have direct URLs on the product pages on the right side there. For most of our products, by the way, that's the secret. You can just do netgear.com/ that model number, and you go right to that switch or the switch series in this case, or the router would be PR460X to add to that as well. But the training academy is something we should talk about too. We've had that for years. A lot of great AV over IP training in there. You can get up to the SDVOE certification, which is really just some really good understanding of network protocols, OSI model, and all this stuff you never thought you needed to know. But even if you're not doing SDVOE stuff, it's just really good information. So all that's on our portal. We have classes on wireless. We have a new series coming out of 8 classes on our Pro Wi-Fi access points and our Insight remote management platform. That's all free to sign up for an account there, netgear.academy. And then, of course, the emails for reaching out to the Pro AV design team. And we have a Pro Wi-Fi design team, too, if that's not enough, for free. So Pro AV design and netgear.com for more of the AV switch network design applications. But Pro Wi-Fi design at netgear.com is the email address to reach out to people for the wireless design of your network and try to figure out where the access points might go. We give you heat maps on that. So lots of opportunities there to reach out and get some help.
That's great. Yeah, no such thing as too much information. The more information, the more resources available for our dealers, the more we can share that with our dealers. And once again, one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you on today's show, just to let our dealers know just how much information is available, not only on the launch of the new M4350 switches, but on all the switches available from NETGEAR. This chart, at first glance, is very intimidating and very overwhelming, but really is packed with a lot of great information. And of course, you don't have to memorize it all now. This information is all going to be available on broadfield.com. Anything that you see in today's presentation is going to be available as well. But John, can you simplify this? What exactly are we looking at here?
Yeah, the main thing here, Jim, is that the green products are available now, right?
Okay.
And then the blue products will be available December, January. It says January 24, so end of the year, first of next. That's the main thing there. But look at those are the basic specs. Of course, all this is on the website, but here's a good comparison chart. We have something we call the AV switch, like we used to call it the use case guide, but it's really AV switch comparison chart or reference chart that we're updating as well. That's like a two-sided thing. We'll have those at CEDIA trade show, and we'll have that out to you guys as well. That gives a good reference in a two-page form of all the basic info of the kind of ports, how many are available, PoE plus or plus plus, the PoE budget, things like that. But the main thing here, this is just for the 4350s. It also shows you the power supplies that are available for the models as well. So that's a really important sheet to have, and you'll have that available.
And what I love about it too is in showing the 4350s that is shipping now and available at Broadfield, and the ones that are coming soon, we're releasing the entire roadmap. A roadmap that incidentally includes a path towards SMPTE 2110, which I think is going to be huge in the broadcast space as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. We've been hearing about that for years, really. We've been waiting. Yeah. It's not an easy endeavor, for sure. Right. And we had to change to a more expensive chipset and a more advanced chipset to get that done. But that's coming up later in the year. We're going through beta testing, I think pretty soon. I think probably next month.
Yep.
So we're going to do our homework, of course, and make sure that it is ready to go, hit the marketplace with some actual customers. I hope to get some use cases from those two right away before they're released. So you'll know right away that this has been validated by XYZ. But those are really going to help us play in that broadcast market where you might use some NDI, sure, but you're really more critical broadcast application where you want that timeliness of the messages to arrive in time that SMPTE 2110 provides. And those are coming later in the year.
And John, Broadfield is actually a distributor for Panasonic and their Kairos system. So we're going to be providing Kairos to a lot of our dealers. And we're working with Matrox on their Convert IP solutions to create this entire SMPTE 2110 workflow. So as soon as your switches are ready, we'll kind of have every piece of the puzzle for our dealers who serve that broadcast marketplace and are really looking to dive into the water for that SMPTE 2110. So I'm really looking forward to that.
What a great resource you guys are providing. You guys are like the proving ground for all that, and then you make sure it works and send it out to your dealers. That's great.
Hey, you know what? But our dealers would be the infantry then. We're throwing them out on the front line, and we know with partners like you and Matrox and Panasonic that we'll have the support that they need to be successful. I would never put my dealer out on the market to their customer without knowing they had a good support system. And that's why I love the partnership that we have with you. And that's why I appreciate you joining us today. You know, I wanted to end off talking again about the 4250, 4300, 4350, a complete line of NETGEAR AV switches available at Broadfield for your next install, the perfect solution for all of your AV applications. John, any parting words for our dealers?
No, I think if you have any questions, you know where to find us. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn if you need to for any other marketing assets, things like that. But let us know what you need. We don't want to do things you don't need. So let us know what you do need, and we'll make sure to take care of that.
Awesome. John, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Definitely a great, I think the star of the show is the 4350. The star of the show is always the NETGEAR AV switches. If you have any questions, reach out to your Broadfield sales team at 800-634-5178. Reach out to Glenn and Logan. They are our sales engineers and can definitely help answer any questions. And they'll know when they need to guide you into that NETGEAR Pro AV design team as well. And we'll get you all the resources you need to quote any project anytime. Broadfield is your source for AV over IP, for the NETGEAR AV switches, and for everything that we talk about every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next week, cheers.
Broadfield Distributing is a value-added distributor of live production, streaming, video editing, and storage products. We only sell to resellers. We are always looking for new dealers, so call us at 1-800-634-5178 or email sales@broadfield.com. You'll like doing business with Broadfield because we make it easy to do business.